I'm Joe Parker. I'm a counselor for the Southside group. I'm also co-owner of Cornerstone, and I'm a product of Cornerstone myself. I got sober in Cornerstone as a teenager in the late 90s, and I awakened from Cornerstone in the summer of 2000, and which seems like a lifetime ago now. And I'm going to give these guys a chance to introduce themselves, but I'm still very actively involved in 12-step recovery. As a lot of you guys know, we are a 12-step program. I still have a sponsor, work the steps, go to meetings, basically do a lot of the same things that your teens and that you guys do to maintain your recovery. One of the great things about the program is that the solution really doesn't change that much, regardless of how much time I may have in recovery. The solution for me stays the same. It's like relationship with some form of a higher power, working the steps with a sponsor, going to meetings, trying to be of service. So I'm gonna let these guys introduce themselves. And I'm really excited and happy to be here with you all this morning. I love you guys.
Hi, I'm Jerry.
Jerry.
My family came to Cornerstone actually August of 2017, and I awakened in April of 2021. It seems like I've been out of the program, but not really for that long. I am still actively participating in Cornerstone activities. I do the Tuesday yoga with Cornerstone every week. And I'm an active member of Riders in Recovery, and I continue to do the 12 steps. I myself do not have the same sponsors I had while I was in the program, but I actually actively do the steps with my sponsees, who I actively am part of their lives, and they're part of my lives, and I probably will be forever. So I'm super happy to be here and hopefully share some experiences with y'all. Love y'all.
Jerry.
I'm Kiernan. We came into Cornerstone 3 years ago, September 2019, and awakened. My wife and I awakened this spring, April, I guess, and still continuing, both of us, to be very active in our recovery, as well as in Cornerstone Riders in Recovery. I just finished step study for the third time. And that's pretty much it. Still pretty active in recovery. Love you guys.
Love you, buddy.
Hi, my name is Alyssa.
Hey, Alyssa.
Alyssa's actually awakening today.
Yes.
With both of her parents.
Yes. My family and I came into Cornerstone in 2019. We're all awakening today. I have a sponsor, I have sponsees. I've been through the steps. I'm sorry, I lost my voice yesterday and it's like kind of coming back.
You're doing great.
I go to yoga, I'm involved in the program. Up until today I've been in second stage and have a home group. I'm in school. Love you.
Hey, I'm Scott.
Hey, Scott.
Our family came to Cornerstone February of 19. Kiernan, when did you? September, February of 19 for us. We have 2 children participating in the program. Our son, Tim, awakened earlier this year or last year, along with myself and my wife Jody, and our daughter Josie is awakening today. So we're very happy and truly lucky to have stumbled ass backwards into Cornerstone, because it made a big difference in our lives. Love you guys.
Love you, Scott.
Love you, buddy. All right, so let's dive right in. I feel frozen. Where do I start? Kieran, I feel frozen. Where do I start?
That's great. I think that's a pretty common experience. I think that's none of us came into Cornerstone because we were on a winning streak. as Joe likes to say. And, you know, I think that the first experience I had with my very first meeting was just a feeling of relief. Like, I don't really know what this is about, but it feels like, you know, this has something to offer that nothing else seems to have worked. So, you know, just showing up is really the most important thing. It doesn't feel like much because you want to solve your problems like now. You want things to stop hurting. But sometimes just feeling a little bit of relief just by being around other people that can relate to what you've gone through, that's enough. Like that is just like, it doesn't sound like much, but it really is, it really works.
So I work at the Memorial Hermann Hospital, Children's Hospital downtown, and the CEO of the hospital used to start all of her discussions with that when our children get sick, our lives stop. And that's certainly what happened when I came to Cornerstone. I had a big full life before I came to Cornerstone, and once my child got sick and we were in here, I felt like I couldn't do anything. I was just completely stuck at where I was. And the things that helped me was actually the program. The program was so structured that it made me get out of myself. I wanted to just go home, get in my pajamas and stay in bed and put the pillow over my head. And because there was climbers on Monday, I got up and went to climbers, which was super important for me. On Wednesdays, there was a meeting in Sugar Land, and I got myself up and I went to that meeting. And Thursday, I got myself up and went to that meeting. And Saturday, I went. And so every single week, the thing that got me out of my frozen spot was hitting every single meeting, and that's what got me started and out of my little tiny world. So.
Awesome.
I definitely relate to this. I have anxiety, and when I came in, that anxiety was so much more intense. And one thing with my anxiety is like, it is like a fight or flight response, and I'd like freeze up and like wouldn't do anything. And one thing that I've learned, like dealing with my anxiety, is like an object in motion stays in motion, an object at rest wants to stay at rest. And whenever I am like in that place of being frozen, like unless an opposite or an equal force acts upon that, I'm going to stay frozen. And I find that just once I put one foot in front of the other, like that ball gets rolling and I stay rolling. And so that looked like showing up to where I was supposed to be. I had a lot of girls take me under their wing and show me what I was supposed to be doing. Because those first few months I felt like I was in a haze and I felt overwhelmed and like generally didn't know what was going on. And that was okay. Like there was just a phase where I had a lot to take in. So that's all.
Cool.
I have a great story, and I won't tell it, but it's about how I was supposed to paint our bathroom, and it took me 2.5 years.
That is a great story.
But I'll answer the question. I think for me, showing up was half the battle, and even though I really wasn't sure what it is that I was supposed to do when I would show up, but showing up made me feel like I was doing something, and then a little less frozen and less alone. So if you're frozen, well, one more thing, you have to be willing to unfreeze yourself, and just show up, just show up and listen, and you'll get there, but you gotta show up.
Yeah, totally. I think that those are some great answers. I'm just going to piggyback off of that real quick. And I would just say that, like, usually when you're coming into recovery, you're pretty much in a place of despair. You're like Kieran had said, nobody shows up on a winning streak for sure. And so in a place of crisis, there's a lot of value in really focusing on what's right in front of you. You know, it's kind of like if you think about like you got this huge elephant sitting on the table in front of you, you're really only going to be able to eat it one bite at a time. And that's kind of where we want to start. We want to start with just like, what's that next bite? So that next bite would be like coming to a meeting or like reaching out to me or one of the staff members and setting up an initial orientation appointment, figuring out like what the next steps beyond that need to be. But a lot of times just showing up, you know, just showing up and being a sponge in a bathtub and just kind of soaking up all of the strength, experience, and hope and love and support in the room is huge and goes a long way. You know, part of our mission is to hopefully deliver a message of like hope and healing to teens and their families. And that's part of my wish, is that for any family that comes to one of our meetings or a parent that comes to one of our meetings, if they leave with nothing else, they leave with a little bit of hope. Or maybe thinking, maybe I'm not alone, because this is a disease of isolation that, you know, that we're dealing with. And it can be very lonely, and it can feel like we are alone. So that kind of segues into a question that I don't necessarily have up here, but I hear sometimes from parents in that like the program asks a lot of parents, and so like I want to hear y'all's opinions on that from your perspective and your experience. But I kind of want to set the table a little bit and have a little bit of real talk around that question. I think it's like normal and human for us to kind of have some of those thoughts or some of those concerns. I also would be careful about like that train of thought of like that it's asking a lot of me, or it's requiring a lot of me. And you know, and to kind of put a different perspective or spin on that, like if chances are if you're here, then you're here for good reason, you know, and there's serious, potentially life-threatening, self-destructive behavior going on with your kid, with your family, that you're going to be dealing with for years, most likely, like long after, and I'll let these guys speak to that because they're the experts, but long after your kid is not in Cornerstone anymore, like their issues are not just going to disappear or go away, and we are certainly, nor is any program like a cure or fix. So, you know, we gotta have some real talk and be honest that we're gonna be dealing with this for years and years and years in some form or fashion. And your time in a program like Cornerstone is kind of like boot camp. Like you want to build up your skills while you're here, and the way to build up our skills is through like the frequency. The way to develop any healthy habit is through the frequency of the meetings that we go to, or the time that I spend with my sponsor, or the time I spend in the literature, or getting educated, you know, or so on and so forth. And, you know, I mean, if your child was at MD Anderson or had like brain cancer, you wouldn't be complaining. You wouldn't be complaining about the travel or about the distance or what it required or whatever. You would just be in the mode of like, well, I'm trying to save my kid's life. Well, you know, guess what? If your kid is in this program or in one similar to it, then they've got a form of cancer, and you are in a fight for their lives. So I want to hear what you guys think about that, but I just kind of wanted to set the tone as far as that question goes.
Want Scott to go first?
Sure, I don't care. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I think sure there is a lot of time required of parents. Part of the secret sauce of the Cornerstone program is that it is a parent-driven recovery program. You know, I don't quite know how kids have made it without much parent involvement, for sure. But I don't know how our kids would have made it without our being involved. And I don't mean being involved in every detail of their lives. I mean being involved with my own program here at Cornerstone. the, you know, the phrase, you may not have, you didn't cause the condition, you can't control the condition, and you can't cure the condition, but you probably, whether you know it or not, contributed a little bit to the condition. And you know, I'll talk to you, you did. It's just, you did.
There you go.
You did. And so that's why you're here. What is it that I can do for myself that can help my family, that can help me, maybe in non-recovery terms, help me set a good example, you know, for my family so that we can have a healthy home. It requires a lot because what you're dealing with requires a lot of effort. I'll leave it at that.
Cool, great. You want to speak to that from your experience of being the kid?
Well, I definitely don't know where I'd be had my parents not done their work in the program. My parents are why we got here. I was definitely not the driving force. No. And I, as a newcomer, definitely had similar thoughts of like, why is this so hard? Why does this take so much work? Why can't I just be fixed already? And then I started thinking about, well, whenever I've been digging myself a hole for my whole life and establishing these like neural pathways in my head that all lead to self-destructive behaviors, and that's what I have been practicing all my life, and that hole gets deeper and deeper, and those neural pathways get like more set in my head, like yeah, it's gonna take a lot of work to like climb out of that hole and to establish new neural pathways, because that's what I've been practicing my whole life, and that takes a lot of time and work. And my parents' sickness like isn't the same as mine, but they dug different holes, and they had like their own holes to learn how to climb out of. And I also like what Joe said, getting here, it's like I'm not just doing this just because I have nothing else to do. Like this is like I'm trying to save my life, and I think that's like worth the work that it takes. I mean, it doesn't take that much to be mediocre, but I want to be more than mediocre, and I think my parents want to be more than mediocre, and so living a life that's not like that takes more than just the bare minimum.
So I remember getting the packet, like when I first started, and having all the requirements, and I was like, what the hell? This is like crazy. Like, who is this person telling me that I'm gonna completely like go to 3 meetings, do all this and that? And at the time, I had this amazing planner, like this family planner that I had, and it was perfect. I had it for years. It was color coded. It had like things for work, each of my kids, my husband's, my extended family. Like it had grocery lists. It had all this and that. And it took me like 5 months for Joe to help me throw it away. Essentially, I remember letting it go, and it was actually a monumental part of my recovery to kind of let that go. And what I learned from all of that was that. When I looked at the planner, I realized that my priorities were not what I really wanted. Some of us get caught up in the rat race at work. Some of us get caught up in, the craziness of family on a day-to-day basis. And my calendar was filled with things that I thought were important to make my life successful, I guess externally to everybody else, but really not the kind of life that I wanted to live. And Cornerstone taught me that. So when I started looking at my calendar and filtering out the things that were really not a priority, and then putting it into there things that became important to me, like climbers was super important to me. Meeting with my sponsors were always on my calendar. Hosting all the kids, going to the family meetings, like my family sessions were always a priority. All of those things. And then yoga, and then bike riding, all of that. I finally figured out that I was living a life that looked really good, but that didn't really bring me joy, happiness, and a full family of what I wanted my family to look like. So when they ask you to do these things, it's not really because they just want you to do. There's actually a purpose behind it, and that purpose really helped me define the kind of life that I wanted to live.
This is a great question. I think if if we're still like negotiating, like what, how to balance Cornerstone with everything else then we're still in denial. Like we're really in denial about what's going on here. And like, it took me a day to be completely bought in. And it's because my son was spiraling the very first night. And after like 2 hours of trying to negotiate with him, my wife finally, like I was doing the negotiating, my wife said, I'm texting Joe. Joe said, don't worry, I'm gonna send some dudes over. And like 15 minutes later, 3 teenagers that I'd never met before rang the doorbell, walked in, went into my son's bedroom, and 5 minutes later, he left with them. All right, Mom, going to an event. I'm like, all right, I don't know what the hell this is about, but I want that. And like, so like I hated missing meetings. Like, I hated it. I couldn't wait for climbers. Like, it was the highlight of my friggin' week for 2.5 years. I loved it. And like, it taught me how to really be vulnerable and how to like understand what it means to be connected. And so I just think like you're missing out if you're not all in. Like, and everyone goes through their own journey, like what that means for them. But it's just willing to be willing. But like, I learned to experience real joy for the first time in my life, no matter what was going on in my life. And it's not about, for me, it didn't become a commitment. It was like, I loved every part of it. So there you go.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna come back to you, Kieran. How do I know if my kid is relapsing?
I mean, a lot of times you don't. That's the reality is, because they're masters at fooling us, right? And sometimes we get hung up on wanting to know. Is my kid using again? Did he relapse? And it's like that we're operating out of fear and control. I think for me, learning to see that relapse was just going to be part of recovery, and that at the end of the day, if my son was relapsing, it was going to get exposed eventually. It just helped me to, like, my job wasn't to be there to prevent him. I put my wife in touch with a mom up in Dallas that I met recently who's in crisis, and she's like sleeping in the bedroom with her 16-year-old daughter who's been like leaving the house at night. That shit doesn't work. So that's kind of like not really a direct answer. It's like, on the other hand, it's like trusting the counselors and the other kids and your gut. When you've been in the program and you're working the program, you can begin to recognize, like, if something's off, there's probably a reason. But also, like, part of it also is if you don't have a plan B and you're not prepared for a relapse, then you're going to be in denial longer about whether your kid is relapsing or not, because you want to avoid that happening. Whereas if you have a plan B, you know that, okay, when this happens, we'll be ready. And your kids will pick up on that. And so I think, part of that is just how it's exposure, like we talk about, like how healthy is the family doing? So relapse tells us like where we're falling short. So I don't know if that makes sense, but expecting and being prepared and not letting it throw you off your recovery is a part of it tends to relapses tend to not recur as much when you have that attitude, as opposed to oh my God, if my son relapses, it's going to be that was our first. I could tell a story. My son went into a rehab facility before we found Cornerstone. In 6 days there, he climbed over the wall and walked 16 miles home in the middle of the night. And I'm like, oh, I got to get him back. And then we went into Cornerstone, and Joe was like, all right, the backup plan is to send him to Sundown. And I didn't have health insurance and I wasn't employed at the time. And I'm like, oh, no, that can't happen. And sure enough, he runs off and comes back, and we got to send him to Sundown. And so it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, And then I learned to all right, I can't control it. So better to expect it to happen and recognize it's not the end of the world. It's just another part of recovery.
Yeah, Jerry?
You know anything about relapsing?
I do know about relapsing. My kid has relapsed more after awakening than he did when he was in the program. And I remember the first time he relapsed, he was 15 years old. And he looked at me and I was devastated, of course. And he looked at me, he said, Mom, you are so clueless. You have no idea when I'm using, I can run circles around you. And it was crazy. I was on the crazy train. My son's name is Aiden, and Aiden the addict is very different than Aiden sober. And so the one thing that I learned to recognize about when he was relapsing was when his behavior changed, because Aiden the addict is kind of an asshole. And so when very recently, just even a couple months ago, he became Aiden the addict, and there was no discussion about using or are you high or this or that. It was I looked at him, and when he came back as the addict, it became very evident that he had been using, and that helped me have that discussion with him as opposed to avoiding it. So for me, the way that I know that he's using is that he changes, because Aiden sober is an amazing person, and he's a really nice, kind-hearted person, but he does change when he's using. So hopefully that's helpful.
Do you have something you want to say there? It's up to you. Go ahead.
First, I like what Karen said, you don't always, but I can tell you what I was like before I went to the mental hospital, and it was not an all of a sudden thing. It was a build-up of dishonesty over months, of low self-esteem and suicidal ideations. I was not being fully honest with other people, and using my support system, and it I think one of the biggest differences between when I'm unhealthy versus when I'm healthy is I still deal with hard things now, but when I'm unhealthy and I'm on the track to relapse, I deal with hard things and I crumble, and so having a team that's emotional or going something hard does not necessarily mean that they're relapsing. It just means that something's hard. But I think for me it was a failure to deal with those things. That was a big indicator.
Yeah, so I'll give you guys a couple kind of tangible things that you can use as measuring sticks or kind of put in your back pocket. Well, the first thing I'll tell you about a relapse or a reset is one, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't have to be a part of someone's recovery, but for a lot of people it is, and that's okay. If there's a relapse or a reset, I really interpret that behavior as your kid waving their hands, screaming for help, and the only way that they know how is by acting out and saying that through their behavior, saying like, I need more than this. Like what we're currently doing is not working. I need more. And if you guys are imperfectly but consistently like working your own programs and you're plugged into a support group and you're like coming to some meetings, Cornerstone, Al-Anon, working with a sponsor, that kind of stuff, then the chances of a relapse or a reset putting you on your heels or throwing you back into a place of chaos or confusion are a lot less. And like Kieran was talking about, if you have a plan B. And if you're doing those things, then your parenting self-esteem is going to be regrowing and getting bigger. And so I would tell you guys to like trust your gut. You know, your gut and your instincts are God-given, therefore good. And your intuition is like what happens when your past experience collides with observation. You know, and like when you're paying attention to like your kid and their behavior and things like who are they spending their time with. You know, like there's never going to be anything more important for your kid than them having healthy friends, or we call them winners. It's going to be part of our like next question that I'll let these guys expand on. But you want to pay attention to that. Like who are they spending their time with? How are they treating me? What is their behavior? What's their schedule like? You know, like what's their routine? You know, 90% of honesty is like, do I do what I say I'm going to do, and am I where I say I'm going to be? And if your kid is doing what they say they're going to do and being where they say they're going to be, then chances are, it's no guarantee, and there never will be, but chances are that there's some honesty, you know, at play there. And if you're paying attention and you're watching those things, then you won't be surprised by it, because nobody just like rolls out of bed into a relapse. Like relapse doesn't just happen. Relapse takes time, over a period of time of me like not taking care of myself, of getting complacent in my program, like letting my relationship with my sponsor slip, letting my commitments become like optional. You know, if your kids' commitments start to become optional, those are like some red flags to like look at and pay attention, because we want them to be developing healthy habits for their life that will serve them long after they're not in a program or not in Cornerstone anymore. And you can start that process now by having them give you a solid meeting schedule / regular schedule that involves things like yoga or bike rides or softball or family night with their sponsor, you know, and having that be like a real commitment and something that goes on the wall or on the fridge next to their shots that everybody signs. So it's like a contract, you know, it's like a covenant that your kid is making with you. And then that gives you a measuring stick of like, is my kid doing what they say that they're going to do? Because if they're not, then it's my job as the parent to recognize that and to use my shots or to hold them accountable. So that being said, I want to transition into this next question. What role do winners play in my teen's life? Scott, you want to start with that one? What role have you seen that winners have played in Tim and Josie's life?
Can I start answering the question by what roles non-winners have played?
Sure. Yeah. We can reverse engineer.
So, Jody and I use this expression that, you know, it's a safe bet that nothing really good ever happens after midnight. And it's a pretty safe bet that if I'm hanging out with non-winners, then not much good is going to come of that. What will come of that is more lying, more secretiveness, a couple of arrests. You just keep going down the line. Winners for us, and we learned this lesson as parents when we weren't quite paying attention to what winners meant. We were, Tim had gone out overnight with a kid that was in the program, but neither one of them were winners, not by a long shot. But we hedged and said, okay, I guess that's fine. Well, it wasn't fine, not at all. Winners are the other secret sauce of the Cornerstone program. Winners are other kids working a program just like your kid, who are strong enough to say to your son or your daughter, hey, let's not do this today, right? That's probably not what we want to do. And they can say it to them in a caring and confident fashion, like a real friend would do. All you kids have quote unquote friends, but they're not real friends. Real friends don't let you do stupid shit, right? So winners are part of the secret sauce of this program. There are other kids that care about your kid that have enough sense and courage to say, let's pause that, let's hold on to that thought for a minute. Let's go do something else. So it saved our son.
I think, if I look back and at, like, every time my son, relapsed or regressed versus those periods where he grew and got really healthy, the one common factor is who he was spending time with. And as parents, the kids that we think are winners, before we get into recovery, don't look anything like the winners I found in Cornerstone. And it started with those first 3 dudes that showed up at the house. They didn't look like winners. And actually, no. It was even before that. Like the first Friday, the first meeting we ever had with Joe was on a Friday, and we showed up at the office and with Patrick, and there was Tim and Eric, and Tim had like a bottle of Welch's grape juice in a brown paper bag, like a glass bottle, and if any of you don't know Tim, like at the time, he just didn't look like a winner. And he was with Eric. And Joe was like, why don't you let your sons go with these dudes? And at that point, I just didn't want to be around my son. And so that was the only reason I said yes, is just to get away from him. And he came into the meeting the next morning, and he was like, that was awesome. They spent the night at the Mutuals. That was his first night in Cornerstone, was at the Mutuals. And actually, to be honest, for those that don't know, my son was missing for 7 weeks. He ran off, and we had this, just to bring it back to the Mutuals here, we had a scavenger hunt at the... It was based mostly around the Galleria that year, and I was asked to be a judge, and that day the kid spotted my son. He had grown his hair and dyed it, and he got away. They called and we saw Patrick at the Galleria, and so I went to the Mutuals last night, and I just let go, and I was judging the contest and watching these videos of these kids doing the stupidest, craziest shit, and it just felt so good. And the next night, my son finally showed up at our house. But what he said later was seeing those kids really that did the trick. He needed to see them, and there were people that cared about him, and that's because he was lost. He had no strength to do anything. He was on the streets. He wasn't couch hopping or anything, and it was seeing those kids that made the difference for him. He found just enough strength, to come back home after seeing those kids. So there you go.
Awesome.
I think I'll emphasize one of the things that Joe said, that developing winners early in Cornerstone is super important, because once they leave Cornerstone, surrounding themselves with winners really, if they do it, it can be real beneficial. But if they go back to the non-winners, it played a really big part in my kid's life. So my kid was sober for 3.5 years while he was in Cornerstone. He was surrounded by, we were all in for Cornerstone. He was, the parent, me and my husband were. But once he awakened, he was one of those kids who kind of strayed away pretty quickly. And within a few months, it was pretty evident that he had surrounded himself with non-winners, and that really quickly led to his first big relapse. And so, I bring this up is because the principles that we learn in Cornerstone, it goes well beyond the awakening. It'll go well beyond tonight. And I deal with these issues. I've been out for almost 2 years, and I deal with this every single week, every single month. And my kid doesn't even live in Texas anymore, but these concepts still keep coming up. I wanted to bring up the fact that that winners as parents is also really important, because I surround myself with winners even though I've been out of Cornerstone for a while. This, to me, one of the most important parts of my recovery. I had one of my sponsees is all into recovery, and she likes to do these challenges, and I give in to her, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do these challenges, and I'm like halfway in the challenge, I'm like, why can't I surround myself with non-recovery people? And I tell her, I'm gonna go out with, I wanna hang out with like obese people who eat fast food every day, who don't go to meetings and don't wanna meet to go over step 4. And so, but really, I mean, my mom squad and my guy squad who helps me are really my winners, and they help me get through my life every single day.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better than that. The only thing that I will say is that I think it's like Warren Buffett, who has, I'm going to butcher it, but he has a quote about something along the lines of like, why would I ever want to get to a place in my life where I didn't want to be around winners? Rather that's like in recovery or in the business world or at the office or, or like whatever. Like, we are like the sum of the 5 most people that we spend our time with. And, like the Cornerstone second step is all about winners, but it says that we found it necessary to stick with winners in order to grow. And those last few words are really the most important part there. Is like, I know that in my recovery, I'm either growing or I'm dying. There's like not really a third direction. It's like I'm walking up an escalator that's going down. If I stop walking, well then, I'm just going down. And to reach the bottom would be like relapse, death, so on and so forth. And so like that, those last few words of in order to grow, that's why in my life today, I still want to place myself around people that are winners for me, that are healthy for me, that are real friends, that are gonna tell me the things that I need to hear, not what I want to hear, aren't gonna co-sign on my BS, are gonna push me to grow. Because if I don't have that in my life, and this was especially true in like early recovery, which all your kids are in, but even today, if I don't have that in my life, I'm not all that great at being a huge winner for myself. And I'm gonna stay in bed as opposed to getting up and going to work out, or I'm gonna go home early on a Tuesday night as opposed to sweating my butt off in hot yoga. Like if left to my own devices, that's most likely the route that I'm gonna take. And when I have winners and healthy people in my life, then I find myself being a lot more like fulfilled and a lot happier and healthier. So next question. So we're going to expand on this a little bit. So this question's all about fear. And so this question says, for parents, how do you get over the fear of calling a shot? But we can expand that beyond the shots of like, if my kid's coming home from treatment, like how do I get over the fear of them coming back home? Or if my kid has been hosting and they're about to like come back home, how do I get over that fear? You know, because we all experience fear. You know, and so there's like many different avenues this question can take. The thing that I would say before I turn it over to these guys is one is just acknowledging it. It's like acknowledging that the fear is there and then bringing that into your program, bringing that into your prayer and meditation, whatever that looks like for you, bringing that into conversations with your sponsor, sharing about it in the meetings that you attend. Like so much of the solution for us is like in the sharing, because the sharing of my fears or my doubts or my disbeliefs, it takes some of the power out of it. And it helps me to feel connected, connected to other people who are either in the same exact boat as I am right now, or have been in the same boat as I am. And they might be a little further down the road. The thing that I like to say is that, like, when you think about recovery, I kind of imagine it as like a long road. And everybody's at different places on the road, but no matter where you're at on the road, everybody is just as close to the ditch. And I think that's it's a good thing for me to remember when I'm thinking about questions like that, about the fear. So curious what you guys have to say about that.
I remember first time I heard the acronym of fear as false events appearing real. That really resonated with me. This is like the big game changer in Cornerstone as parents, is learning to recognize fear as for what it is. And it's really, really challenging. It's what the hardest thing we do as parents is learn to recognize and overcome our fears. And so just as simply as possible, it's something that you have to work on. It's not just a matter of like willpower. It takes practice, and so doing it with others in baby steps. So that's why we go to climbers. Climbers is that week in and week out, so that when that one thing happens, you've been doing the prep work, you've been doing the drill, and because in that moment your fear is going to kick in, and it's happened to me over and over and over again. And I'm terrified, but I just let the work that I've been doing take over, and okay, I've been down here before, I know the drill. I text my sponsor, I call Joe, I refer to the shots that have already been written, we've had the counseling sessions, all the work I've put in kicks in at that moment, and it gets me through it. And the biggest example for me was after my son got out of Sundown. About 2 weeks later, he cut himself. He was self-harming and needed 12 stitches. And it was a winter that brought it to our attention. He was just that moment down in the bedroom where your son is experiencing suicidal ideation. He's cut himself, and it's terrifying. And then he's pleading to just go for a walk or whatever, and you just want to baby him. But, we just went through the drill because it had been drilled into our head. So, called Joe, called Kirk, called the psych, and it was like, he needs to go to the hospital. And so I said, Patrick, you're either getting in the car with me right now and we're going to the hospital, or I'm going to call the cops. And then I shut up. I never would have been able to say that if it hadn't been for all the work that I'd done. And we had to sit on our hands for 2 minutes. And then he said, okay. And then after that, it was great. Ethan was there, and we went to Ben Taub, the three of us, right as COVID was starting. And we had believe it or not, there was The Walking Dead in the weight room at Ben Taub. And I made a 3 o'clock in the morning run to Whataburger. And so it's funny, the other side of fear is oh, no big deal. It's always before you go through it, that is the worst moment. And so just letting go and going through it, the drill. But if you haven't done the work, you'll find a reason not to go through the drill, so.
The question about fear about calling a shot,
Yeah,
part of it?
yeah, that's part of it. But
I think I just went over this last weekend with a parent asked me this after the golf tournament. I hated calling shots. It was awful. I would get so hyped up about having to call a shot on my kid that I would almost break out in hives and things like that. But going to climbers helps a lot, and staying in touch with your counselors who can help you get through it really, really helped. For me and my husband, we would fight over who would have to call the shot until we finally agreed that we had to do it together because we needed to have a united front. And because we were so bad, well, it wasn't so bad that we were bad at it, is that our kid was such a great negotiator, because in middle school we sent him to debate club and debate camp, and so it totally backfired because he's an amazing, amazing negotiator. But one of the things, two things that really helped us, number one, we practiced. It's crazy, like, you know, you practice to give a speech at work, or you practice this and that. So I would stand in front of the mirror and practice giving a shot. And we learned in climbers to keep it short and sweet. And then the other thing was to avoid negotiation. So once we delivered the shot, I would run upstairs and close the door so he couldn't come and negotiate with me. And it came to the point about who was gonna run faster up the stairs, me or my husband, to get into the room to then shut the door. But we had to come up with things that helped us deal with how we knew he was gonna react to the shot. And after practicing, we had a lot of practice, a lot of shots, it became easier and easier. So don't give up, practice, and keep it short and sweet.
did you want to add anything from the team perspective?
Most of the time well, first of all, I'm actually really grateful in hindsight for like all the times I had shots called on me. Most of the time, like, I understood why they were being called. And I will tell you what, I can handle the consequences of the shots. I cannot handle being lectured. So I really liked it whenever, like, my parents would be like, okay, you know, you did this wrong, and, like, here's your consequence. And I'd be like, okay, all right, like, but, like, as soon as it was, like, a conversation, and it was, like, everyone sits down on the couch, and we gotta, like, talk about it. It's like, just give me my consequence, and I will do it, and I get it, and it normally doesn't happen again. And a lot of the shots I actually look on pretty fondly. There was a time when I was not doing my step work. My consequence was like, okay, you're gonna sleep in the garage. And it was the middle of the summer. And I slept in the garage for like a week, and it was so hot, I like covered myself in frozen vegetables. Because there was no air conditioning, and I was like sweating, and I like couldn't sleep, and you know what, I got my step work done, it was good, now it's funny. At the time it was just hot and it sucked. But I appreciate it now.
Well said. Okay. How have holiday celebrations changed entering into recovery, or before, during, and post Cornerstone? This is pretty relevant right now.
I mean, I haven't had a drink in 3 years, and I'm never gonna go back to drinking. So, like, the first thing is there's no alcohol in my house, and I've had the best holidays in the last 3 years. So that's a change. I had a family member who probably is an alcoholic, and I haven't seen her in like 2.5, 3 years. Cause I put the kibosh on like the 4th bottle of wine, you know, and like, she didn't like that. So that's a big change. And I think, you know, the first couple of years it was like, okay, we gotta have Thanksgiving at a certain hour because we're going to our, you know, our gratitude meeting. And, that's pretty much it. Like, I don't have a whole lot of extended family, in Houston, so, but the other thing, I think, I don't know, I would say that those are the biggest changes for me.
Cool.
So I spent my first year in Cornerstone at sundown for Thanksgiving and Christmas because my son was in sundown. He had relapse actually on Halloween. So holidays are overall kind of crappy for me in general. One thing that I learned in climbers was that for the holidays, one of the suggestions was that you minimize exposure to extended family because sometimes they don't understand, and so we started that. I was super happy that was a great suggestion. But then we were in Cornerstone for a couple years. We always had hosties, so. I had over 30 hosties over a 3.5-year period of time. So we actually used the holidays like Thanksgiving. I remember assigning there were usually more than one teenager in my household. Like someone was gonna do the stovetop stuffing, one was gonna do like the rolls, and so everybody had to contribute to our Thanksgiving lunch because all of us went to the gratitude meeting. So for me, holidays, for Thanksgiving especially, is represented by the gratitude meeting. I'm a little bit nervous this year. This is the first year all of my kids are out of the house and they're actually coming home, and I'm not quite sure how that's gonna look like in the next week and a half. So it's always a fear for me how things are gonna happen during the holidays, but we're still all into Cornerstone, so.
Scott?
Sure.
Anything you want to add there?
We don't have a large extended family, and everyone lives all over the country. So we hadn't really been presented with that scenario too often. But on the occasions that it came up, it's a true test of where you are in your program. At the end of the 12 steps, it finishes with honesty is freedom from self-deception. And if you are trying to deceive yourself or the people that you're around with about what you're going through, you probably need to work a little harder on your program. And having a family event really tests how honest you are. Now, I'm not saying you have to share all the gory details, but if you're not willing to admit that we're going through a problem, whether it be self-harm or drug abuse or what have you, you should maybe look a little deeper at how far you're really going in your recovery and how honest you're being with yourself. It's not easy, but for me, it's a real temperature gauge of how honest am I being about my recovery and our recovery. And I will say one thing, I don't have any problem sharing where I am in my recovery, but one thing we did do with our son was, look, this is your story. Okay, we want you to be honest. We want you to tell your story. We'll support whatever you want, but we're not gonna lie. We're not gonna gloss over things. So when it came to the kids, it was not us telling his story or her story. They had to tell it. That's all.
Great. Melissa? God bless you. God bless you.
I think our holidays have definitely improved, at least for myself. I felt a lot better, like during the holidays, like being in Cornerstone. But one thing I really appreciate is, well, first, I'm not in the program because I was drinking. I've never really like cared for alcohol. It just never interested me. But like my parents drank, and I really like that there's like normally no alcohol or like very little at family gatherings, and if like people are drinking, it's normally not my parents, which I love because I don't like being around drunk, sloppy people. It's like just uncomfortable, and it's like, well, I don't want to talk to you, and it's like weird. I just feel a lot more comfortable at family gatherings, and it's like easier. I think we get along better when like I'm not going through a crisis, and it's like we can just enjoy the time. And if there's drama, it's like normally not mine, which is pretty cool. So that's all.
Nice. And I would just add to that real quick and say like that it would be regrettable to try to like force something these holidays and sacrifice many, many years of holidays moving forward. You know, if we gotta refocus and be like, okay, we need to do what we need to do right now, currently, to make sure that my kid and the family is safe, protected, taken care of. And if that means that we have to abstain this year and we miss out this year for what hopefully will be, you know, participating for the next 30 years, then so be it. And because recovery is really always got to be the number one concern for you, for your kid. And if you end up going to family gatherings, just have an exit strategy. You know, just have a conversation with your kid going in, just being like, hey, this is too much, or you're uncomfortable, you pull the plug, no questions asked, like, we're out of there. Like, we got your back, you know, and or that, and or have, if possible, have another one of their friends come with them. So they've got a buddy there with them to give them some support, or have the event at your house where you can control whether or not there's going to be alcohol. Okay, so I think this is probably a pretty good question for us to go out on. What happens that you go from an unmanageable life to laughing? When does that happen? Kiernan.
When do you go from an unmanageable life to laughing?
Yeah.
I mean, I've said this a lot, and I really believe it, and I've lived it. Like, having fun is work. It's a job. Like, it's a responsibility. It's important. And so my earliest first, you know, when I was new in Cornerstone, I had kind of the similar mindset to this question. Like, I can't wait for things to be like I see it with these other families that have been in recovery for a while, and their kid's a winner, and you know, they're feeling good. And so the idea is like, I'll be happy when things are going well, when things are manageable. And actually, that's not how it works. It's the opposite. Like, when you start laughing, that's when things become manageable, because you learn how to laugh again. So first learn how to laugh, and then things will become manageable.
God, I didn't laugh for months. I think I just cried, like the whole.
Learn how to cry too. Learn how to cry. I've cried so much. You gotta learn how to cry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I cried a lot. I think for me it was step 3. I've been called resistant. I'm still called resistant by certain people in Riders in Recovery, but
I wonder who that is.
I wonder who that is. But I was super resistant when I came in. I just wanted my kid fixed, and I would go to Climbers or all of the meetings, and it took me forever to get a sponsor. It took me forever to start the steps. But once I started the steps, once I truly started the steps and got to step 3, and I could let go, was when I started feeling like my life was going to be okay. And that was the moment that I started, I could come to the meetings and hug everyone and laugh and be part of the fun crowd at Climbers, and what I thought was like the fun crowd at Climbers. And you know, a lot of people ask me why I do Riders in Recovery, because it's not easy. It's scary to ride the bike sometimes. It's scary to go down some of the hills, and I'm usually not in the front. I'm usually in the back. But it's so much fun. I don't know if you've never been to a ride, I'm just gonna put my plug in right now.
Good.
If you've never been to a ride, it is a lot of fun to be with the teenagers, to be with the other parents, to be with Kirk. We just came back from a trip to Arkansas, and I know that Alyssa can attest to even like the 6-hour ride listening to 70s disco music. It was just so much fun and so much laughter that even though like, she was sick. It was fun. I saw you like listening to the music, and then all the extra comments that went with it. But I mean, I'm part of Riders in Recovery because it's good for my health. It's good to be around winners and things like that. But it is just something that's so much fun that I look forward to on a weekly basis. And you know, one of the things that I forgot about when I first joined Cornerstone, because I was on the crazy train and my life was just devastated, was to have fun. And the things that I thought were fun before Cornerstone were probably fun, but all the extra things that I gained from Cornerstone has just really made my life so full. And part of that is just laughter, because we forget how to laugh, and laughter on a daily basis is just such great medicine. So there.
The change started once I had hope. And nothing was funny pre-Cornerstone, because I thought I was gonna feel sucky forever, and I thought that I was going to die as a teenager, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what the solution was, and I couldn't see myself getting out of that hole. And the difference is today, like, I still go through sucky stuff, but like even in like some of the worst times I've had in sobriety, I'm like able to laugh and have fun because I know it's not gonna suck forever. I recently actually like broke up with my boyfriend, and that was so hard to do, and then also like was able to like talk about it and like laugh that there's like a new Taylor Swift album out, and it's like I'm glad I'm going through a breakup with the Taylor Swift album out. And I know I'm taken care of, and it could be temporary and it could be not. Like had like I gone through something painful like as a newcomer or like in my addiction, I would have fallen apart. So hope is like a huge reason why I'm able to laugh and have fun.
When we first arrived at Cornerstone, similar to what Kieran had explained, there were families that were doing well, and they were smiling, and they actually spoke with one another and seemed to be at peace, and you know, and we knew what their story was like, so it seemed very similar to ours. And I wanted that. I want, you know, so, you know, unfortunately, I couldn't just write a check to Joe. I wrote a lot of checks, but you know, have you ever watched a stand-up comedian just by yourself, and then watched a stand-up comedian in a room with a bunch of friends? You laugh a lot when you're connected with people, and when you're by yourself, for me, I kind of chuckle, it's funny, but when Jody's in the room with me, it's hysterical. Making these connections, you know, showing up and making connections, for me, even early on, when things were still pretty shitty, I found that I was able to laugh because I was showing up and making connections with people, and I always find you know, opportunities to crack jokes, but I mean, at that point in my life, without connection, it was very difficult to really laugh. And once I started to show up and make connections, it just started to come. It just started to coming for me. That's all.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's, excuse me, there's something to be said about like those that like give the most, get the most. So the more engaged I am, the more the meetings I'm coming to, climbers, the extracurricular stuff, the parent-teen functions, you know, being a judge at scavenger hunts, hosting functions, sponsoring, like all of that stuff, then the more I'm exposing myself to the good stuff, to the fun, to the laughter, to the enthusiasm, because there's so much of it to be had. And there's also something to be said about like that we got to embrace the suck. You know, that's the only way through it. Embracing the suck is all about leaning in and understanding that this is going to be painful for a period of time, but the pain is unavoidable in order to get better or in order to progress. You know, the thing about pain is that it's usually messy and pretty much always painful. You know, and this is no different. But there is a great deal of fun and levity and joking and laughter about it all. You know, laughter is the language of recovery. So I think that we're pretty much about out of time. Thank you guys so much for being here this morning. Can we get a round of applause for our awesome panel? Thank you guys for your dedication, your willingness to still engage in your own recovery as well as continue to show up and give. It does not go unnoticed, and I'm grateful for all of y'all.